Okay, so as I said yesterday, for those who were there, in October 2010, we had a workshop at the French Center on the transition between the late Chalcolithic and the EB1A. And I think that everybody agreed, more or less, that this transition period takes place roughly between 3800 BC and 3600 BC. The main results obtained outlined that there was a continuity of occupation between the late Chalcolithic and the EB1 period, but that this continuity was to be observed only in the Shephelah and the coastal plain on sites such as Modin, Yesodot, or Ashkelon, as Amir has just now presented the site. In this paper, I propose to better understand this transition period in the north by raising the questions of the demise of the Rasulian societies and the beginning of the EB1. For this purpose, I propose to consider ancient societies in terms of network structures in order to benefit from sociological models explaining evolution process. Network structures are usually studied based on probable interactions among those sites that share consumption of objects, for example, given similarities in the proportions of ceramic types at pairs of sites. Interactions are thus measured through the sharing of attributes. However, the social content of this interaction is not measured because similarity objects can be the results of different types of interactions. Studies in the anthropology of techniques can bring light to this issue. They've shown that craft techniques are good candidates to draw social connections between sites because transmission of craft techniques requires necessarily social learning with a tutor usually selected within one's social group. As a consequence, distribution of craft techniques express learning networks and therefore social identity. Craft techniques can be described in terms of chaîne opératoire, that is, the series of actions that transform raw material into finished products. These series of actions are unique and therefore distinguish between traditions linked through the transmission of information and convergent solutions to specific situations. In this regard, similarity of ceramic chaîne opératoire between sites signals individuals belonging to the same social groups, and on the contrary, dissimilarity in chaîne opératoire between sites signals different communities whose individuals do not share the same practices. So in order first to understand the Rasulian network structure, the chaîne opératoire carried out for making the mundane ceramic vessels have been analyzed in terms of similarity, dissimilarity on more than a dozen other assemblages, all belonging to the Rasulian periods. The sites, as you can see on the map, are located in the different regions of the southern Levant. The results obtained highlight that a unique chaîne opératoire was carried out by all the communities of the southern Levant. It is characterized by the following operations. Clay material is usually local, mixed with 20–30% coarse mineral grains, whose size depends on the thickness of the walls. The bases are modeled from a lump of clay into a disc, whose edges are raised up. An inner peripheral coil is then placed on the disc against the edges. The next successive coils are placed by internal apposition against the interface, creating oblique junctions. Once the body is shaped, the rim is thin and shaped with a wet piece of cloth with or without rotary motion, and the interface is smoothed with fingers. The vessel is then left dry until leather hard consistency. Elements are applied at that point: decorative bands, handles, and for all the vessel, an extra coil around the external base, probably as a reinforcement piece. A coating is then applied vertically or obliquely on the outer face for the closed vessels and on outer and inner faces for the open vessels. This coating is attested for all types of ceramics, whatever the size and shape, that is, whatever the function. Once dried, the vessels were fired in oxidized atmosphere in open firings. As said before, this chain opératoire has been identified on all the sites studied, located in the Negev, the Jordan Valley, the Shephelah, the Galilee, the Hula Valley, and the Golan. It is used to fashion all the utilitarian vessels, whatever the size and function. The use of the same chain opératoire, shared at the scale of the southern Levant, testify to individuals who have learned the same way, who then belong to the same learning network, and therefore to the same social group. Communities were interacting with each other, possibly, let's say, through matrimonial alliances, but also at a given point in time, as shown by ceramic technopetrographic studies. Indeed, these studies reveal, on the one hand, that ceramic assemblages of cultic or burial sites highlight regional connections. On the other hand, that the ceramic assemblage of Abu Hamid is made of vessels coming from all over the southern Levant, highlighting connections at the population level. By reference to sociological models, and I won't get into details here, such a network connectivity might have caused shared social norms to emerge from local interactions, even though people had no knowledge they were coordinating at a global scale, which could then well explain both the sharing of the same norms at the scale of the southern Levant and the absence of any sign of some sort of centralized power. Now, there are variants to this chain opératoire, like the use of a slip in the northern sites or the use of mat supports in Rasoul. Interestingly, these variants correspond to distinct regional networks, as shown in the north with the red slipped assemblages overlapping the zone of distribution of the perforated flint tools. These variants point to subgroups having their own networks, but however included within the same large social group of the order of a tribe or an ethnic group. The dispersal of the Rasoulian communities might have followed different directions depending on each subgroup network. The Negev communities might have gone both northwards towards the Shephelah and the coastal plain, and southwards toward Egypt, as shown by the presence of southern Levantine Rasoulian vessels in the sites of the lower Egypt cultures. The ones from the Jordan Valley may have gone northwards, while the ones from the north may have gone northwest in relationship with the northern network. As a result, between 3800 and 3600 BC, only the Shephelah and the coastal plain remained inhabited, while the other regions were abandoned following the electrification episode. So what happened next? Kafar Kana is an interesting site to understand the rest of the story in the north. It is located in the western Lower Galilee. Salvage excavations were recently conducted on behalf of the Antiquities authorities by Edwin van den Brink. Late Chalcolithic and early Bronze Age 1 settlement remains had been previously recorded. They've been again well recognized, both stratigraphically and by the finds. There are clearly two strata, one with Rasoulian pottery, and one with early EB1 pottery, with no transitional phase as such, but locally separated from one another by a 40 centimeter thick featureless soil field. The late Chalcolithic ceramics are made according to the Rasoulian chaîne opératoire as described before. As for the EB1 ceramics, other than the grey burnished ware, the chaîne opératoire is surprisingly the same as the Rasoulian one. The bases are modeled into a disc with edges raised up. An inner peripheral coil is applied against the edges. Coils are placed by internal apposition against the inner face. An outer coil is applied at the junction between the outer base and the body. The outer base is coated and then slipped. This Rasoulian chaîne opératoire has been also observed at Iftael Stratum 2. Same coarse clay paste, same way of making the base, same way of forming the bodies, and same surface treatment, namely coating and red slip. This similarity of the chaîne opératoire between the Rasoulian and the early EB1 ceramics suggests a phylogenetic link between the Rasoulian and the early EB1 communities. This amounts to say that the northern Rasoulian communities were the ancestors of the northern EB1 communities. They are the ones who left by the early of the 4th millennium BC and came back a few centuries later. They came back with new traits, such as the apsidal houses, which should be then taken as the expression of the contacts they had while away in the north. The ceramic shapes, of course, also have evolved, if only by the principle of descent with modification. What's about now the grey burnished ware? How to interpret it into this context, knowing that they do correspond to a new chaîne opératoire characterized by two new technical operations, burnishing and reduced firing. Observation on Kaffir-Kana material, as well as on Iftael material, suggests that it was a local invention in relationship with the return of the communities on the land. First, the forming technique. This is the same forming technique than the one used for the rest of the material. Same way of making the bases and same way of placing the coils. In this regard, the new technical operations take place within the framework of the local tradition. Second, as already noted by Elliot Brown, the shape of the grey burnished ware are very much in continuity with the Rasoulian shapes. And third, the clay paste. Analysis conducted by Yuval Goren and Sharon Zuckerman on a large body of vessels, as well as by Shapiro on the Kaffir-Kana material, indicate a local Galilean marly clay with grog as a major non-plastic material. Grog is never put in the utilitarian vessel. One finds it only with the grey burnished ware. Now, ethnographic cases indicate the use of grog in relationship with cult of ancestors. Knowing then that the shapes are in continuity with Rasoulian cultic vessels, that the forming technique is similar to the Rasoulian one, and that the grey burnished ware is distributed only in the zones where the communities came back after a few hundred years, we suggest that the grey burnished ware was invented for a cult of ancestors on the occasion of the return of the communities to the land of their ancestors. As a way to conclude, the presence of grey burnished ware further south, associated with that of the apsidal houses, should be now considered in light of the fact that the southern and northern communities were linked by old social ties, those that prevailed during the Rasoulian period, and that might have been reactivated upon the return of the northern communities. Thank you for your attention.